Good evening from Dhaka. Good afternoon, good morning for those of you in different time zones. And welcome to this keynote speech, one of a series of keynote speeches by eminent international experts that we have invited to speak to us during the Gobeshona conference. My name is Salimul Haq. I'm the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development. And on behalf of the conference organizers, I'd like to welcome everybody, and in particular, our keynote speaker today, Professor John Carruthers from Cornell University. Before I introduce him formally and give him the floor, let me give a little bit of a background on the Gobeshona conference and the series, how we've done them in the past, how we have come to this one, and how this one is going to be different, and in particular, how we plan to go forward. So for those of you who are not familiar with the word Gobeshona, it's a Bangla word for the word research, and it's the word we chose to set up a platform of researchers working on climate change in Bangladesh 7 years ago now. We started the journey, and we brought together primarily research institutions, universities, some NGOs, some government agencies, a number of international friends and partners who are doing research on climate change in Bangladesh. And we have a website, gobeshona.net, where we archive publications on climate change and Bangladesh. And we have well over 2,500 publications in a searchable database there. We do on a regular basis, we have monthly seminars by researchers who are doing research to share their research. We used to do it physically in one of the partner organizations. Every month, one of them would host it. But more recently, we've been doing them online as webinars. And then each January for the last 6 years, we had this Gobeshona conference, a large gathering of several hundred people over 4 days at our university, the Independent University in Bosundhara in Dhaka, mostly from Bangladesh, but quite a few international participants as well who would fly in and participate and join us in Dhaka. This year, because of COVID-19, we decided to go virtual, so it's not an in-person conference. But by virtue of it being virtual, we also thought of making it a global conference, not just a Bangladesh-based conference. And we reached out to friends and partners around the world, and we got an amazing, overwhelming response from people willing to join in, particularly on the theme of locally led adaptation, which is happening everywhere. There are local groups doing adaptation around the world, and many of them heard about this and offered to run sessions. So we have over the 7 days, and today is the second day, uh, uh, 90 sessions, and we are running them over 24 hours every day for 7 days. So it's a 24/7 sessions with 3 major time segments aimed at different continents. The first time segment is the Asia Pacific time segment, 8 hours. Then we move to the Africa and Europe time segment, where partners in Africa and Europe hold sessions. And then we move to the Americas time segment, where North America, South America, and Central America. And this particular session is sort of on the East Coast America time segment, where I'm able to join from Dhaka, although it's quite late here in Dhaka. And then we did this 24 hours already yesterday, and we're about to complete another 24 hours today. And we're going to do this for 7 days until the 24th of January when we finish. And then the outputs and outcomes of this will feed into the Climate Adaptation Summit, which is going to take place on the 25th and 26th of January. If you are not already aware of that, I would recommend that you look it up and attend it. It's a global summit that's going to be initiated. Initially, the high-level segment is going to be hosted by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands and the Secretary General of the UN and a number of heads of state, including Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. That starts on the morning of the 25th of January as a virtual event. And then it moves around the world in 11 two-hour segments on different thematic issues. They are called anchor events. And on the 26th of January, there's going to be an anchor event on locally led adaptation, which is the theme of the entire Gobeshona conference this year. And so at that Climate Adaptation Summit on the 26th, I will be given a 5-minute slot to share the outputs or outcomes from the Gobeshona conference and talk about what we plan to do next. And what we plan to do next is to make this into a virtual conference even next year and years beyond. If the situation goes back to normal in terms of travel, we are not going to make this into a physical event. We will keep it a virtual event. We will keep it a global event, and we will keep the theme on locally led adaptation. And what we are hoping to do in this conference, so this conference is the 7th of the old series, but we are now rebranding it as the first of a new series, which will take us to 2030 over the next 10 years. And we're characterizing this as the beginning of what we are calling a 10-year journey to promote locally led adaptation going forward. And we invite all our participants, organizations, host sessions, session hosts, etc., who have participated this year to think about what we can do next year and then the year after that, come together every year to track progress, to see what we are doing that we can build on and develop further going forward. So that is sort of where we are with the Gobeshona conference. I'll now move to introduce Professor John Carruthers, who is a good friend of Bangladesh. John has been to previous conferences. He's flown to Dhaka to come and participate and present his work. He works on urban cities and climate change, and he has been working on the concept together with us on how do we develop migrant-friendly cities, which is a program that we are trying to develop here in Bangladesh. So let me hand over to John, who is has a co-author for this, which is a former colleague of ours at ICAD, at my center, Yusuf Mahid, who is currently with John at Cornell University doing his PhD. So that's a good forward sort of collaboration that we have already instituted. So John, thank you very much for giving Yusuf the opportunity to do his PhD with you. I would now like to hand over to you to give your presentation, and then following the presentation, we'll have a conversation, you and I, and if any of the audience have questions, I would ask them to put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we'll have a look at them, and I'll ask you to answer some of them if you can before we end. So John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Salim. It is a real privilege to be here, and though I certainly wish I were there in Bangladesh, I can say that one silver lining of the virtual conference is that it spares us the jet lag. I have, to the audience as a whole, I want to say that I have benefited immensely from Salim's mentorship and invitations to Bangladesh, and I am very much a student of Bangladesh, and it is in that spirit that I come to you today to give this keynote speech, to share some of my observations that I have gained by visiting Bangladesh over the years. Sadly, due to the pandemic, 2020 is the first year in about 5 years that I've not been to Bangladesh. So I'm very eager to get back in person and continue learning about and from the country. It's a country that I have very much fallen in love with in many ways, and so as I make this presentation, I'm here to share with you some of my thoughts and observations that I've gained over the years, integrated with my own way of thinking about things. I am an urban planner by training. My home field is an interdisciplinary field called regional science, which is easiest described as spatial economics. So you'll hear me talking bit about spatial economics during this presentation, but not in too technical a way. So with that, I'm going to turn off my videos, and hopefully everybody can see my screen. Like any good keynote presentation, and I hope it's good, this presentation is a reflection of thoughts and ideas, many of which are not my own. These are certainly ideas that I've gathered together and processed. Yusuf Mahid, who is a alum of the International Center for Climate Change and Development, and now a doctoral student of mine here at Cornell University, has kindly allowed me to use his good name in this presentation. So as I have gotten to know Bangladesh better and better, my ideas have become more and more a synthesis of not just my thinking, but of the thinking of others, including those from the academy, from policy, from international development, and indeed from the citizens and people of Bangladesh who have been very generous with me in sharing their perspectives and helping me learn. So I give to you today this presentation with in that spirit, and hope that it generates some good thinking about a research agenda on planning for climate-friendly cities. This is a portrait taken several years ago, my hand and several children's hands in Bangladesh it's a favorite picture of mine that I like to look at. Okay, the rise of Bangladesh. I'm going to talk about looking at Bangladesh from a kind of a macroeconomic perspective, and then from a microeconomic perspective. The tools of macroeconomics and microeconomics are very different. But a lot of what we deal with in the development sphere and urban planning are actually combinations of macroeconomic and microeconomic questions. So I'm going to, without being too technical, I'm going to go from a macroeconomic perspective down to a microeconomic perspective in this presentation. Now, I always teach my students, if you want to.
John, sorry to
John,
interrupt. The slide has moved. It's on the opening.
Has not moved. Okay.
No. Maybe you need to go full screen again and
is it
yes,
moving
now we're getting, yes, it is moving now.
Okay, good. All right. So let me do it this way then. So from something that I always teach my students is that if you want to influence people's thinking, don't show them equations, show them pictures of beautiful children. So therefore we have the hands of the children here. This is the one equation that you will see in this presentation, and it simply is about growth in economic growth when viewed from a global perspective. And Bangladesh has certainly grown over the years. It remains a relatively poor country, but it is facing the challenges that it is presented with, first and foremost, climate change, standing up. And this is something that I think the entire world stands to benefit from learning from Bangladesh, is with very limited resources, producing a resilient response to what is indeed the dominant challenge of the 21st century. So now to speak a little bit as a planner, this is a quote that I like very much from Saul Alinsky, who was a community organizer here in the United States. He organized people of color in Chicago around housing discrimination issues in the 1960s. Saul Alinsky, in addition to inspiring me and many others, is cited as by former President Obama as one of his inspirations. And Saul Alinsky says that as an organizer, I start from where the world is, as it is, not as I would like it to be. And this is important, what he says now. He says that we accept the world as it is does not in any sense weaken our desire to change it into what we believe it should be. It is necessary to begin where the world is if we're going to change it into what we think it should be. And I like this quote very much because it's easy to look around the world and find things that we are unhappy about. I certainly do that myself. But changing those things and changing those things for the better, for the common good, requires that we accept things as we find them and we face them head on. We don't face the world as we would like it to be. We face it as it is, and then we think about how we would get it to be. And this is something that is at the core of urban planning. So now I had said here the rise of Bangladesh, some what in economic terms would be called stylized facts. These are simply just some statistical facts that I would like to step through about Bangladesh's position um, and how it has evolved over the past 50 years. The data that you're going to see in the tables and charts that are coming here come from the World Bank, its development indicators database. So the total population of Bangladesh has increased by 100 million souls over the past 50 years. In 1971, which I guess was just post Civil War, when Bangladesh was separated from, became Bangladesh instead of East Pakistan, it had a little over 65 million people. Today, it has nearly 165 million people. The GDP in real dollars, and these are measured in 2010 dollars, has increased also dramatically along that time period by a degree of roughly 10 times what it was 50 years ago. And you can see this in per capita terms as well. Per capita GDP from 1971 to 2019 has increased by nearly $1,000 in, again, in real dollars, in inflation adjusted dollars, benchmarked at 2010. So it's this per capita GDP that I want you to keep in mind. You're going to see this on all of the charts that I'm going to show. This chart in per capita GDP will always appear in blue, or depending on how it resolves on your screen, in a dark blue, navy blue line or black line, and it is the arc, and it registers on the left-hand y-axis. The other variables that I'm going to show you with respect to GDP register on the right-hand y-axis. So there's two different scales here, but it enables us to compare time series over this 50-year period together to get a sense of where Bangladesh is. So this is population in the arc of, or the pretty much the straight line of population growth in Bangladesh. You'll see that the slope of this line changes about 20 years ago, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Bangladesh has increased its trade with the rest of the world to its advantage, again, doubling the proportion of its GDP, its gross domestic product, that is attributed to international trade over the past 50 years, from about 17% to close to 37%. And that's what this looks like. And again, on all of these charts, you're going to see the blue arc there, which is the rise in real GDP. And this is the red line in this case is the percentage of GDP that's attributed to international trade. So by engaging with the world economy, Bangladesh has enabled itself to lift its economy, its own economy. The fertility rate has slowly fallen in Bangladesh, and currently rests. I apologize, the 2019 data was not available, and I should have just entered the 2018, which I think is about 2 children per woman now, and that's fallen from nearly 7 children per woman in 1971. And so here you can see that as the fertility rate has fallen, and I understand that that has been done as a matter of public policy with engagement among men and women in the country with engagement among imams and religious leaders in the country, and has really been something that is helped um, to stabilize the population of Bangladesh, which of course is the densest population, densest settled country on the planet. So that is the fertility rate falling over 50 years. Bangladesh's population pyramid, though, remains very young. You can see here that the bottom of the pyramid is very wide. We have a lot of young people. We'll come back to that later at the end of the presentation when we talk about human capital. And Bangladesh is rich in a lot of things, but it is particularly rich in human capital. Human capital, economists love to disagree, but one thing that economists will agree upon is that human capital is generally a nation's greatest asset. And in this regard, even though Bangladesh may appear to be poor in monetary terms compared to other countries in the world, in my opinion and indeed in my experience, Bangladesh really is sitting on one of the greatest bases of natural resources in the world, which is its human capital. That can be observed here. Government expenditure on education as a percentage of GDP around 2000, the turn of the century, it was about 2%. It's fallen a little bit since then. I don't know if that's as a result of policy measures or just simple growth in GDP. But here's a statistic that is incredibly important. This is the literacy rate of people aged 15. This is all people, men and women combined, aged 15 and above. And that has grown from under 50% just 20 years ago to 75% today. And that is just an incredible statistic to look at. The share of population, and this one is formatted improperly, I apologize for that, but the share of population that is young in Bangladesh below age 15 has fallen to about a third from nearly half of the population being that size 50 years ago. So here, again, we're looking at the growth in GDP and the decrease in the number of the proportion of people, young people in the country to about a third of the population being children, say, under 15 years old. Life expectancy in Bangladesh has grown. And again, here, it's grown from under 50 years in 1971, 50 years ago, to over 65 years in 2001 to just over 70 years today, which is, again, a quite remarkable strides in life expectancy. To put that in perspective, life expectancy in the United States is around 80 years old as well. So it's to make those kinds of strides, even though this is over a long time period, is really quite remarkable. Now this brings me to my realm, urban planning. And as I mentioned, I'm an urban planner by training and an urban economist by tendency. And an economist would ask, well, why do we have cities in the first place? And the simple answer to that, and a simplistic answer to that, but a very a good answer to that, is because cities make us better off. Cities are the furnaces of human prosperity, is what an economist would argue. So if we look at the percentage of the population that is urban in Bangladesh, it has grown from under 10% to nearly 40% over the past 50 years. So Bangladesh has shifted, like much of the rest of the world, from being a rural nation to an increasingly urban nation. The population, the growth rate of the urban population has slowly declined, but this is a function of the sheer numbers of people. As you get greater numbers of people in cities, the population growth rate kind of slows down as a result of that. Here you can see, again, GDP. graphed against, on the right-hand axis, the rise in the percentage of people that are living in urban areas in Bangladesh. And as that curve ascends on the GDP side, it also ascends on the urbanization side. Here's a subset of that. This is the percentage of people living in cities that are 1 million people or greater, and that has gone from 3.5% in 1971 to about 15.5% today. And here again, you can see that graphed against GDP. And then finally, the percentage of people living in the largest city, that of course being Dhaka. In 1971, it was about 30% of the population, and that number has remained stable, remarkably stable over the past 50 years. It has fluctuated a little bit, you know, but it still rests at about 30%. And going back to this notion of migrant-friendly cities, this is not my idea. This is an idea that that Salim and his colleagues have produced. And the whole object of this idea is to take the growth pressure off of Dhaka. When you look at the top row of this table and you realize that over this 50 years, the nation of Bangladesh has gained 100 million souls, and the proportion of the population living in the Dhaka megacity has remained stable. You can easily see that the population of Dhaka has had to swell in direct proportion with the number of people in Bangladesh. So the whole idea behind migrant-friendly cities is to redistribute population in a way that creates more balanced territorial growth. Just to put some numbers to this, in the Dhaka administrative district, this is the greater Dhaka region, not Dhaka proper, but there's about 40 million people living in that region, which is a lot of people to plan for and a lot of people to try to take care of from a public policy perspective. So there are, you know, there's a very strong rationale for trying to take some of the pressure off of Dhaka. Simply because of the limits of what policy is able to do to care for people and provide them with good services and provide them with a well-functioning urban environment. The good news about this is that Bangladesh has a very well-developed urban hierarchy. This graph is simply a graph of population against the rank of population. What the point of this graph is that you have many, many, many small places and just a few very big places. The top 10 big places are the places that are called out in gray on this graph. But you can see that below the top 10, there are many other settlements on the order of hundreds of other settlements that could act as anchors or centers for migration in Bangladesh, and that's a good thing. This graph, simple as it is just a descriptive graph, is what the pattern that we expect to see in a nation with a well-developed urban hierarchy. So ideas are public goods. That means they're non-exclusive and non-rival, which is why I am, that's non-exclusive and non-rival just means that anybody can use them. And so that is why I have found myself able to liberally adopt Salim and his colleagues' ideas of migrant-friendly cities. The idea behind building migrant-friendly cities, and we'll add to that climate-resistant, comes from Salim and his colleagues at the International Center for Climate Change. And it boils down to this basic kind of planning framework. And Salim, I've heard him describe this before as a meme. It's not so much a policy prescription, but an idea that ICAD is trying to promote in Bangladesh. And I happen to think that it's a very, very good idea. But the key idea is to identify a number of secondary towns. In my world, in the chart that I just showed you, those would be towns that are to the left of the large tent settlements that are called out in gray, to identify secondary cities that can accommodate 1 million migrants over the next 10 years or so. This is intended to be a bottom-up participatory approach where relevant actors play their particular parts in a collaborative and cooperative process. Collaborative and cooperative processes are fundamental to getting urban planning right. Along the way, investment is needed in both human and physical domains to make these towns both climate resilient and migrant friendly. Um, and each town needs to invest in its employment base, its export base. We've looked at before how the rise of Bangladesh, if you look at it in real dollars and constant dollar terms over the past 50 years, has been linked to the engagement of the Bangladeshi economy with that of the global economy. And so as Bangladesh exports its goods, it brings foreign dollars into the Bangladeshi economy. And that's a way to grow wealth. So investment in these climate and migrant-friendly cities should be thought of as being export-oriented type of economic development. So these towns would invest in manufacturing or services that would generate employment, ideally that would generate export-oriented employment. And the reason the importance of export-oriented employment, again, goes back to the chart the figures that I've showed you about trade, because that is how to bring assets from abroad into Bangladesh to grow the wealth of the nation. The central government can play an anchor role for this, but this is something that really needs to happen at the local level in places like the port city of Mangla and other small towns that are ready and willing to grow. This is just a simple map of Bangladesh. Here's a map of population density in Bangladesh. This comes from Google's new Earth Engine app, which is quite nice. But here you can see the Dhaka megacity stands out at the center of Bangladesh, and is if Dhaka can be said to be dwarfed, it's dwarfed by Calcutta across the border in India. So questions about planning and population redistribution. Planning needs to be thought about holistically. So to me, that means thinking about planning in terms of, and no one person can do it all. But these are different elements, 6 different elements of planning that I feel are important to the migrant-friendly cities concept and the objectives of creating migrant-friendly cities. And those are land use, housing, economic development, infrastructure, the natural environment, and public participation. So the subtitle of this talk was a research agenda. So I'm just going to pose questions and to hopefully get us thinking about things that we want to know. These are very general questions on each of these fronts. But in terms of land use, how will the territory of Bangladesh be used in coming years, in the coming decades? We know that Bangladesh is the densest settled nation on the planet. It's a very small nation in terms of territory. So there are very good and very difficult questions to be answered about how Bangladesh will use its territory to maintain its agricultural base, to house its population, to accommodate urbanization, and all the rest. Housing, where and how will people live? Where has to do with the migrant-friendly cities, and then planning within those cities has to do with how people will live, at what densities, and what type of housing will people live in once they get there. Economic development, what will people do? What will people do in these migrant-friendly cities? I've mentioned the importance in general terms of export-oriented economic development, but we need to put a finer point on that and think seriously about what people will do and how to develop the economies of migrant-friendly cities. Infrastructure, what kind of investments need to be prioritized? Right now, the Podman Bridge is being built. Probably, well, it's the middle of the night in Bangladesh, so I was going to say probably as I speak, but maybe they work around the clock. I don't know. But the Podman Bridge is being built, and that's a major infrastructure investment that is clearly going to change the spatial arrangement of development in Bangladesh. But what other kind of investments should be prioritized? The natural environment, and I'm going to get to this in a few minutes here, because this is the fine point of this entire presentation, is how to ensure the stability of Bangladesh's natural environment. Because my perspective is what I have learned from visiting Bangladesh is that the human environment and the natural environments are inextricably linked in Bangladesh. And indeed, human prosperity in Bangladesh depends on the prosperity of the natural environment. And finally, public participation, how to promote inclusivity. Planning needs to be an inclusive process. It doesn't, planning needs to be, decisions and inputs to planning need to be made by the people that are affected by planning. One of the things that is unique about urban planning as a field, as a public policy field, or let me say as a field in general, whether it's done as a public or private enterprise, is that planning is a field that is very much in touch with the day-to-day lives of the people that it impacts. So we can't lose sight of that, and public participation is fundamental for that reason. So to that point, what do people want? And here I want to emphasize that from an economic perspective, good public policy is public policy that facilitates individual choice. And economists use the word utility to talk about happiness. And when we think about public policy, we think about public policy that enhances utility, but that's not simply, to paraphrase my colleague Ed Glazer from Harvard University, that's not simply about putting smiles on people's faces. That's about enhancing individual choice. And when people are enabled, empowered to make their own choices, they are pretty good at making themselves happy. So when we think about public policy can't be all things to all people. So what public policy can do, what makes policy good, is policy that enhances people's ability to make their own choices, to make individual choices. And this is, again, I want to keep coming down on this over and over again today. This is why I think the migrant-friendly city concept is such a powerful concept and has such potential for impact in Bangladesh. Is it is a concept that really does facilitate individual choice. So in terms of individual choice, we can think of, I've been using the word migration throughout this presentation. It's driven by a combination of opportunity and preference. So people move for opportunity, they come to take a job, but they also move for personal preference. They live in parts of the country that they want to be in, where they have family connections, where they like the environment, where there are amenities, whether they are natural amenities or human amenities, that they want to partake in. So any kind of migration decision that is made by an individual can be viewed as somewhere as being informed somewhere along this continuum. People moving for some sort of balance of opportunity and preference. And here again is why migrant-friendly cities is such a powerful concept. This is a satellite view of Bangladesh. I like it a lot. It's beautiful and green. It happens to be a false color image, but it brings out the green of Bangladesh beautifully. The Dhaka megacity is visible in the northwest corner of this, with the Ganges River running through the middle. The Sundarbans, to my mind, and this is where I'm going to go and kind of with the remainder of my presentation, the Sundarbans are the key to sustainable development in Bangladesh. I don't know this to be the case, but I strongly believe this to be the case. Salim is a botanist, so I will defer to him on mangrove forestry practices. But here are pictures of the Sundarbans that I've taken during my visits. it's one of my favorite places in the world, I can say. Um, it really is someplace that has become quite special to me. So forgive me for expressing my own personal biases, but these are photographs that I've taken down in the Sundarban region, wildlife, tiger tracking, and so on. This map and the maps that I'm about to show you also come from Google, and a very good new tool that has been produced by Google. I think I have the data source here in the presentation, yes. Um, so this is the map of the region that to get us situated. We have, you can see Kolkata, the mega city over in the west, and Khulna at the top of this map. The Sundarban forest is 2/3 in Bangladesh and 1/3 in India, and the Google's analytical tools have started to track the loss of mangrove forests across the world. And there's a number of different mangrove forests, but one of the key mangrove forests in the world is the Sundarban forest. So here we're looking at the loss of Sundarbans between 2000 and 2015. And I know that it's hard to see on a computer screen. I've set that at a dark. You can see the white areas at the bottom. They're actually kind of bright blue, and we're going to zoom in on them a little bit. And again, I encourage you to use this tool because it enables you to see this up close. But you can see the loss of the Sundarbans happening over a very short time period. Certainly down at the shores of the Bay of Bengal, but also in the river system that extends upward into the forest. Now this is zooming in and shifting a bit to the east. So we're looking really at the Bangladeshi side of the Sundarban forest now. These are again in the white or bright blue. Sundarbans lost over the past 15 years or so. When I met the mayor of Mangla, I asked him in his office, and this is some time ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. When I go back, at the time I was working at the George Washington University, and I asked him a question. I said, what do you want me to know? What is the biggest threat that you face when I go back to my classroom and speak to my students? And he didn't miss a beat. He said saltwater intrusion. And what we're seeing here is the impacts of saltwater intrusion on the Sundarban forest as this very delicate ecosystem is upset. So the primary loss of Sundarbans is indeed due to water. And here, the bright areas, I know the colors are difficult to distinguish at the slide area, but so just allow me to explain. The bright areas shown here are those locations where the Sundarbans are being lost as a result of saltwater intrusion. You can see that the effect is quite significant. The primary loss is also due to erosion. Saltwater intrusion, erosion of the soils that support the Sundarban forests. And here again, you can see they're green in this map, this particular map, but the areas in green and yellow are areas that have been lost over the past 15 years as a result of erosion. And that is, of course, goes hand in hand with loss to water and saltwater intrusion. So to bring this back full circle to kind of conclude my remarks, I cannot emphasize enough that people are a nation's greatest asset. Human capital is a nation's greatest asset. And I showed an equation at the beginning of this presentation on purpose because I wanted to show a very simple model of how macroeconomists think about growth in GDP. But I want to end the presentation by bringing this back to who we're doing this for, why we are why do good planning, why put so much effort into good planning, and it is for the human capital of the nation. And here I've chosen, as I said, if you want to influence people, don't show equations, show pictures of beautiful children. not everybody here is children. We have a mother and we have a baker who's a friendly guy. So thank you very much. And I appreciate your attention and be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, John, for that excellent presentation. I'm going to kick off our conversation and then invite you to, at the same time, if you don't mind, have a look at the chat box in the Q&A. There's a couple of questions there for you. I'll ask you to respond to in a little while. But let me start the conversation with an update of how this all started. In fact, I recall when one of your early trips to Bangladesh, where you pointed out something that I hadn't thought of, which was the consequence of the Podman Bridge in Bangladesh, bringing the region of Khulna nearer to the region of Dhaka in economic terms by making transport that much more easy and swift. And although that economically is definitely a good thing, it would have consequences for the kind of development that takes place in Khulna, particularly in and around the Sundarban forest. And since then, as you know, I have written about this, you and I have been discussing this, and we are very much at a fork in the road with regards to what kind of development is likely to happen and what kind of development would we like to happen in the southwestern part of the country around Khulna. If we don't take action now, we will end up with a lot of development that is not friendly to the environment, not friendly to the forest. We are already seeing lots of people buying up land and planning to put up all kinds of factories and establishments that are not compatible with preserving and conserving the forest. On the other hand, we can definitely think of ways in which we can have a more eco-friendly set of commercial investments that will give us development, but without destroying the forest. Now, one of the important things that has happened since we've had these conversations a few years ago has been the concept of nature-based solutions. This has now sort of become quite a big thing. And just to give you a little anecdote, when we advertised the Gobeshona conference this time and we got lots of applications to run sessions, we did a word cloud with all the different words. The biggest words were locally led adaptation, which is what the conference was all about. But then the second biggest and the third biggest are nature-based solutions and urban. And we've already had quite a few sessions on nature-based solutions and urban. And to me, your talk, and particularly the Southwest Bangladesh conundrum of urbanization there, is a combination of the two. It's urbanization and nature-based solutions, and how can you bring the two together in a compatible as opposed to an adversarial manner. And it's now something, I must say, that is not as far-fetched as it used to be in terms of thinking, but it hasn't penetrated into decision-making or planning process. And as you know, the Podman Bridge is very near to completion. It will be completed fairly soon. We're talking months, not years anymore. And so the time window for taking action is drawing closer and closer. So one of the things I am very keen to promote and continue to promote, and I seek your advice and collaboration in writing about it, at least on the scientific evidence side. We can write papers and then we can use those for advocacy, evidence-based advocacy with the appropriate decision makers, is how do we make a convincing case that a more nature-based approach can actually result in the kind of development that will still have good development, but without destroying the remaining Sundarbans that we have. Have you given this a little bit further thought since we last talked?
Yes, I have, and I know, I don't know if Yusuf is here or not, but Yusuf has been thinking about this, and I believe it will likely be the topic of his dissertation. Um, to me, the Podman Bridge question or problem represents one of the most challenging and important planning um, challenges and planning problems in the world right now. There's absolutely no question that the opening of the Padma Bridge is going to spur economic growth in the southwestern region of Bangladesh, and there's no question that economic growth, to the extent that it is evenly shared, is to the benefit of people. But the key here is understanding that people reside in the ecosphere, that we are organisms on this planet like any other. And time will tell whether or not people are a successful organism. And I think certain ecologists would take that type of longer view. Urbanization, the good news about cities is that cities, when done right, are good for the environment. They keep people off of the land. They pack people together at high densities. They keep people close together. They facilitate commerce. They facilitate the change of ideas. They make things work for people. And then the corollary to that is they also dense urbanization, or urbanization that is planned properly, can in fact be a policy for environmental preservation. So I really do think that the Podman Bridge project is one of the dominant urban planning challenges, and one of the most urgent urban planning challenges on the entire globe right now.
Great, thank you. John, if you don't mind having a look at the Q&A box, are you able to open that? There's
Sure.
a couple of questions there which are fairly long, so I won't read them. If you can just maybe have a quick look and maybe a quick response as well. We will need to finish at the end of the hour, if that's all right.
Sure. So to the point of the first question on the issue of public policy, I think this question from Sultana is about information, and how do we ensure that information is shared. It is incumbent upon us as planners, policymakers, academics, anybody that wants to enter this sphere, to enter it as an honest broker and as an equal broker, not to put themselves on a pedestal above others, or not to um, to bring to the table what we have to offer, but also understand that anybody that comes to this conversation has something to offer. So to me, the answer to this question lies in communication. That may be very general, but to me, at the heart of that is communication.
Great, thank you. Do you want to take the next one from Stockholm Resilience Institute?
In many places, the city and non-city have been both. Yeah, this is I think this gets a little bit outside of my expertise, because this has to do with urban design. But here, I guess I can, as we would say in the United States anyway, plead the fifth. And I won't self-incriminate myself, but what I would do is say that we need many voices in this discussion, and we certainly need urban designers in the discussion to ensure that these kinds of questions are addressed as cities develop. You don't want to leave design up to me, because I'm just simply no good at it, but I do appreciate it. So I will limit my comments to that, and say that I would defer to one of my colleagues as a physical planner or an urban designer to help with that. Another question from Mika. In my point of view, do you consider planning for migrants? At what point do you consider planning for migrants healthy? This is an interesting question, and if I'm understanding it correctly, it has to do with laying the groundwork for people coming. People can't come, people can't come if there's no space for them. And space means physical space, it means housing, it means economic space, jobs. It also means, and this is something that I've heard Salim speak to very eloquently over the years, and I could not agree more. It means social space and acceptance, accepting people as not as others, but as one of the whole, and laying the groundwork to be an inclusive society and be an accepting society. This is something that it's not unique to Bangladesh. Look, at our inauguration tomorrow here in the United States, and this is a problem the world over. But it is absolutely fundamental to laying the groundwork for, as important as infrastructure, housing, economic development, and all the rest, the inclusivity element, the social element, is just as important, and perhaps even more important, to ensure that people indeed feel welcome.
Great.
Right?
Thank you very much, John. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up now. So let me thank you very much for your presentation and your discussions. I look forward to your being able to come back on your annual visits to Bangladesh, and perhaps bring your students, as you used to do when you were at George Washington University. We would love to have them come and visit us as well from Cornell. But in the meantime, we live in this virtual world, so let us see if we can make the most of it in terms of collaboration, continuing to talk and work together and write together whenever we can, and at least keep our thinking going and our collaboration going forward as best we can under these circumstances, and look forward to the days when we can visit each other again. I remember visiting you in Cornell when you had just moved in there, and you were very generous with your time with me there, and I look forward to coming back there again. So John, let me give you the last word, and then we'll conclude.
Well, I will just say thank you. It's always a privilege to be included in these meetings, and I hope people appreciated my comments. They're given very much as a student of Bangladesh. I'm a long way away from being able to prescribe anything. It's again, I will just conclude by saying that Bangladesh is a country that I have truly fallen in love with and care deeply about. So I cannot wait to return there in person.
Great. Thank you very much, John. We look forward to continuing our collaboration, and also to let you know the recording of this session will be put up fairly soon, and you can then distribute it and share it with others if you wish to do that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, so let me say goodbye.
Best wishes. Stay well and healthy.
Bye-bye.